Thank you very much for joining our third quarter legislative town hall. This is Kat Hungerford with the American Association of Private Lenders. Also on the line, I have several of our government relations committee who will be leading and answering questions during this webinar. So we'll go ahead and wait for just another minute while we wait for some more attendees, latecomers to come onto the call, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming today. All right, let's go ahead and get our webinar started. So I would like to welcome you again to our third legislative town hall for this year. We started our GRC in February of this year, and we've been working to gear up and get our committee active and also tackle some of the legislation that's come down the line. So in that effort, we have these quarterly town halls to make sure that we are talking to our members and the public to ensure that we're doing everything that they want us to do and that we're tackling issues that are important to them. So before we get into the main part of the town hall, I do have some housekeeping items that I would like to address. Matt, if you could flip to the next slide for me. All right, so we do want as much of your participation as possible during this webinar. This is supposed to be a two-way conversation to bring you into our process. So anytime you have a question, I encourage you to use the Ask a Question feature, or if you want to speak, go ahead and use the Raise Your Hand feature. We will have pauses throughout the presentation to make sure that we are answering those questions for you. I'll be talking them aloud so that anybody from the GRC can chime in to take the question, and then of course unmuting you if you'd like to speak and you have your hand raised. So that takes care of the housekeeping. Now I'd like to introduce you to Matt Gunter. He is our legal chair for the Government Relations Committee, and he is also in charge of our Northeast region, which has some activity in New York, so he's got some exciting things to talk about. So Matt, I'll let you take it from there.
Hi everyone. So yeah, my name is Matt Gunter, legal chair, and I'll be speaking today, and we'll talk about the Florida bill that we've talked about many times previously and how we had a great success in defeating that bill. I'll address a little bit of the high level of what was going on, and then we'll have Edwin, who took care of a lot of the boots on the ground work, explain some details and why that experience is very important to us as we move forward, because we have a New York bill that pertains only to New York City that's coming up for consideration in the next session, and we'll talk more about that and how RIA relationships, specifically for these types of situations, are going to be vital to us in combating negative legislation that comes our way. And of course, at any time, if there's questions, don't have to wait till the end. Just raise your hand or get the question, so we can stop and answer. Again, with the Florida bill, it was sorry for that. With the Florida bill, that was about changing the definition of what is a residential mortgage loan. As it stands, a residential mortgage loan is specifically defined in Florida to be a couple of different things, and it varies depending on what type of property. It could be commercial property, it could be multi-unit, but by and large, it is currently defined as something that is it involves a personal, family, or household use of those funds that are lent. What was attempted was to change that definition to get rid of the portion that describes it as a personal, family, or household use, and thus incorporating within the definition commercial loans, business purpose loans. And if that had changed, all of us doing business in Florida would have been required to get a license. And to get a little bit more detail on that, Edwin, if you could explain exactly how we were able to defeat that.
Yes, thank you, Matt, for that, and thank you, Kat, for having us on. My name is Edwin Epperson, and I was very involved with this Florida bill, if you will, that was going through the House. The GRC was actually created right on the heels of this bill being introduced, and so there was an immediate need for representation at the Florida Senate. And so myself, another gentleman, Robert Parker, who is a local private lender down in the Sarasota area, we made our way up to Tallahassee and met with NEMA, who was representing the AAPL and private lenders across the nation that actively lend in Florida. What this bill was specifically created by one individual who has a lot of political connections out of Miami, and he actually has the license requirement that is in place for people that are originating and lending on owner-occupied properties, as well as he does hard money lending. He saw this as, it was very clearly, he saw this as an opportunity to squash competition and really relegate the only lending activity to licensed lenders who were in the residential consumer lending business. And as many of you that are here and a part of the AAPL, your business model is based on business purpose, commercial lending, even if the asset, the underlying asset that is being collateralized, securitized, is a single family resident. So that whole push was really, it was for self-interest, and he had a lot of political backing behind that. What really made the difference in us being able to defeat the bill was boots on the ground. And I think that this is going to be the reverberating stance that the AAPL, specifically the GRC, has for those of us who are wanting to get more involved in the legislations at the state that are going to affect our business. We have to be actively involved. Twofold, obviously we were there personally. Mr. Parker, myself, and Nima were up there several different times over the course of 2 weeks. We met with the senators. We stood before the Senate 2 specific times. But a lot of that leading up to and even after those Senate meetings or the Senate panel was a lot of walking the halls of the Senate and the Congress and poking our heads into random offices, seeing if they had a few minutes, and just talking to them about what exactly was happening with the bill. So I cannot stress how important it is that if there is a bill in the state that you actively lend in, or even in the region, and you have the ability to go and represent the private lenders at that local legislation, wherever the Senate or the Congress that's hosting that legislation, that hearing, is vitally important. And then the second aspect is, again, as Matt mentioned, is building those relationships with the local RIAs. Luckily, we had met up with the Tallahassee Investors Network there in Tallahassee, Florida, where the capital is at. They were instrumental. They literally provided, on the first day, the first hearing that we had, they provided anywhere from 8 to 10 individuals, and they were able to either stand up if they wanted to and verbally give a testimony of how private lenders helped them do their business, or they could simply write it in, and it was read off in the Senate hearing. That was extremely important. This was very rapid. This bill was introduced very rapidly, and it was actually being pushed both in the Senate and the House. We were able to, ultimately, I believe we were able to get it defeated because of the testimony of the local real estate investors that were there represented, as well as Nima's testimony and his stance on what this bill would do. And so I can't explain how important that is, how important the GRC is and instrumental in helping fight this, but also the community that is being built around the local RIA clubs. And obviously, as private lenders, we're constantly looking for deal flow. So knowing that we are involved with the local RIA clubs, it gives the local RIA clubs in a position to talk to potential clients of your business. So multifaceted, multi reasons why we should be more involved in the local RIA clubs within the states. But those were the two determining factors in helping getting the bill defeated.
We do have a comment from someone. Alfred Bell says, to all involved, thank you so much for taking care of this Florida issue. My private lending company is lending in Florida right now. and we are planning on moving our biz to Florida this year as well. Thank you, Alfred, for that comment. We really appreciate feedback and knowing that it's actually helping a lot of Florida businesses, and they know what's going on with this.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your thanks. And again, anybody that's on the call, if they know or are personally invested in Florida or any other state like New York, what Matt's going to be talking about, it's vitally important to have representation there. Sometimes, you know, it was proven time and time again how much having a physical presence there and vocally verbalizing your opposition or support of the bill really carries a lot of sway with the senators. So yes, thank you for your support.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Edwin, for explaining that in detail. You know, exactly that type of effort is what we in New York. So flipping to the next page here, for those of you who are not aware, it's been published on AAPL's website. We've been trying to get petitions signed or with everybody's signatures as much as we can to show our disapproval of this bill. And what this does is it would create a 15 to 20% conveyance tax. That's a tax at the sale of the property, payable by the seller. That money going to the city of New York on every single property, as long as that property was bought and be sold within 2 years. If it's within 1 year, it's 20%. If it's within 2 years, it's 15%. I think it's quite clear that that is an extraordinary amount of money, and that percentage is far greater than the expected return on investment for almost every project. So instead of potentially reducing lending or borrowing in the city of New York, that it could in fact completely kill all borrowing and lending in the city of New York for fix and flip loans, for the rehab loans, for quick turnover loans. So the idea behind this bill, at least the published idea, is that it's going to discourage quick sales of property. I think everybody's aware that they have like a gentrification. They're against gentrification. The increase in value of properties, increasing the sale price, increasing the purchase price, and therefore pricing out lower income household, lower income tenants. It reduces the housing stock potentially for those people, and they have an affordable housing crisis in New York. So fixing the affordable housing crisis is, of course, something that everybody should encourage, to increase the stock of affordable housing. But what this bill is trying to do is create a new revenue stream for the city to be able to fund its affordable housing efforts, while at the same time discouraging the type of investment that promotes an increase in purchase prices or increases in rents. But what we believe that the legislature has not considered is that it would actually have the exact opposite effect. Because the tax is set so high, it would eliminate investment in the city, and there would be far fewer new housing options. There would be less housing stock available. The housing stock that remains available would be dilapidated or in a blighted state, not really fit for habitation. And the revenue that the government currently gets from conveyance taxes would actually decrease from its current level, because there will be far fewer transactions taking place, which would then hamper their ability to fund their affordable housing initiatives. So what we've done so far is sent letters on AAPL letterhead to the various senators and assembly members who have sponsored this bill and a companion identical bill in the New York Assembly, expressing to them our disapproval and explaining why this is a bad bill, explaining further that AAPL supports and our industry supports the efforts to increase affordable housing. In fact, we are poised to be a very helpful industry in contributing investment and building new housing stock. but that this particular bill is the wrong way to go about it. We're planning on doing an in-person meeting with these senators and assembly members, penciled in currently for October 15th. Kat might be able to chime in on to say what we're going to do with how that's working, but it still remains to be seen. We're about 2 months out from that. But we're going to have an in-person meeting where we want to have a call, email, phone campaign that pushes against this bill as much as we can do, especially lenders who focus on New York or New York City. This is a real good focus for you to call your senator, call your assembly members, let them know why this is a bad idea. Session doesn't even begin to start until January, but this bill has already been in session from the previous session in 2018, 2019, so it already has. It's already gone through some of the processes up in Albany, so it's poised to move quickly once the session starts. We really need to hit the ground running now when it's still out of session, get our voices heard. And again, this is another opportunity to reach out to your RIA groups, especially in New York, anybody you know that can raise their voice. Anyone else on GRC have anything to add to that?
Matt, this is Court. Matt, this is Court. Nice job with the outline. I know we've got about 17 people, maybe 12 other people on the call. I'm wondering if anybody likes to chime in on, is this the first time you've heard of the issue in New York? And what, if anything, how do you feel about what you're hearing about a conveyance tax in New York City?
I don't have any answers to that question coming in right yet, but we will hold it and go ahead and find a place where you could answer that question if you want to respond in the question box. Even if you don't have an idea what you want to say now, we can take it into consideration later in the webinar too.
Moving on to the next topic, again, we keep hammering on these RIA relationships. This is like a must-do for everybody. We want to partner with allies. That's what this whole organization is about, is coming together with people of like minds, like situations, like industries. We all are participating in this real estate industry together. So go talk to or join RIAs to kind of promote what we're trying to do and what we're trying to stop. So again, this is really important for the New York legislation. It's important for any other state legislation or federal or anything like that. So it's important to do something as a group to get your voice heard. It's we're louder and paid attention to more as a group. And if anyone needs information about that, there's a link on this slide here, and they can get in touch through that way. And that brings us to the end of the substance of this conversation. But again, this is what we want you to be asking us. We're asking you to ask us: is there any other legislation out there anywhere that you have heard about that we should know about? We're doing our best to try to find as much as we can to keep track of it, to address anything that might come up, but we might miss something. So if there's something that you notice, even if you think we might have seen it before, just let us know and we can look at it and then bring it to everybody's attention. Same thing with our legislative campaigns. Are there any suggestions that you can offer for approach this? How to get more traction with legislators in New York or in Florida or in anywhere else? And finally, just the GRC or AAPL in general, what else would you like us to address that we might not be doing currently? Are there any needs that you have that we can address or answer? And with that, I will again leave it open to more questions if they can come in.
Yes, we just had a question come in from Alfred. New York is a mortgage-based. Judicial foreclosures can run up to 18 months and trap lender capital in a very negative way. Wouldn't be inclined to lend there due to the above. My opinion, typical government involvement in business and local economy, and they are unwittingly shooting themselves in the foot and making things more difficult for lenders, investors, etc. Thank you for that comment, Alfred.
Yeah, Alfred, I like the word unwittingly at the end. I don't know yet whether the senators have considered the outcome of this legislation currently as to, are they intending to completely eliminate our industry in New York City, or do they actually think that this is a good revenue stream? It's hard to believe that they could think that a 15 or 20% tax would be actually enable a revenue stream to come in, that wouldn't have some sort of negative impact on the deal flow. But you know, it is kind of it's written in such a way as you can't really get their opinions, their mindset from it. But that's exactly what we're trying to do with our in-person conversations. Again, I've called some of the offices of these senators, and again, only spoken to staff members. But it's still preliminary. The staff members aren't really sure about this bill, and they're interested in setting up a meeting with us. But it's all in flux at this point. Once we get an understanding of where the senators stand as to the reasoning behind this, the real reasoning, more than just what's written here in the bill, we'll finally understand whether they actually meant to do this or if it's just an unwitting legislative overreach.
Hey, Matt, this is Court. And again, just a quick comment for everybody listening in on today's webinar. If you go to the AAPL website, you'll find a link to a petition that I highly encourage you to sign. It would help us a lot. It would help us help you a lot, at least for those partners in New York. If you go to the link and fill out the petition, it literally takes about 30 seconds. And add your name to the list of people that show their objection to the New York State conveyance tax initiative. That'd be really helpful. Thanks a bunch.
We have another comment from Alfred. He said, yes, corruption, hidden agendas, et cetera, could be a factor, but we know government advisors, economists, et cetera, are so often clueless and create so many unintended negative consequences. But corruption is a factor. Thank you, Alfred. And yes, Alfred especially, you should definitely sign that petition if you haven't already.
I see a question about whether the tax is based on the sales price or the profit. I'd have to go through it again, but my memory of the language was on the sales price. Profit would be too hard to calculate or too open-ended for the legislature to pass. So my memory says that this is based on sales price, and it's not capped at anything.
And we have another question from Alfred. What about major banks, institutions being behind this to put an end to us private lenders? Does this affect banks, or is it only affecting the private lender market?
The answer to that is it would affect banks, but banks traditionally don't make these types of short-term loans, which is exactly why our industry is here. So to the extent that a bank does make a loan that is be paid off within 2 years, yes, it would affect them. But again, most of their industry is the standard 30-year mortgage, so that's not really going to happen all too often for them.
We don't have any questions in the queue at this point. I did want to talk about, if we're waiting for some last questions to come in, if there are any. We do have our next town hall coming up on November 9. That one will actually be in person at our conference. So if you are attending our conference or find yourself in Vegas around that time, the town hall portion of the conference is free and public with no RSVP required. Just show up and we'll let you in. If you do want to attend the rest of the conference, that will require the separate registration that we normally have as part of that. But we did want to make sure that we were keeping that town hall as open to the public as possible. I know that from the technology side of things, that for those of you who aren't necessarily able to make it into Las Vegas for our conference, we are planning on trying to do something with Facebook Live or some other way that other people who can't make it in can attend and ask questions the same as you're attending here today. So please take a look at it, and we look forward to hearing more from you in person.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for attending. We don't have any other questions right now, but you can always respond to the webinar invite itself, and that'll get back to me. And then, of course, if you think of something later to talk about on this or any topic related to legislation, feel free to go online at aaplonline.com/government to contact the GRC. That's actually our government relations dashboard, so you can find not only ways to contact the GRC, but sign the petition, see what other activity has been done, see a record of all of the letters and official communication we've had in government since we started this up this year, and a whole bunch more things, including the recap for this webinar here that you're attending today. So thank you very much for attending. Matt, did you have anything else you wanted to wrap up with?
That's it.
And actually, we have one last question, Hugo. We're going to make sure we answer it for you. In Florida, if the borrower is an LLC and as such a non-consumer, then the loan is outside of Dodd-Frank. So this is the comment I'm asking for clarification on Florida law.
Yes, Kat, if I will, I can answer that. Hugo, that was exactly the reason that this bill was introduced, is because right now the way that it is stated, what defines a residential mortgage is a 1 to 4 unit single family residence that is, its primary purpose is for personal residence, for people to live there. If that's the case, then you need to have a license to make the loan, which we all are aware of, and that's why the majority of people that are doing short-term investment purpose loans are not making consumer loans. The bill that was introduced, and this will have been the 3rd year that this bill has been pushed and supported by the same individual out of Miami, was because he wanted to have the actual definition of a mortgage loan being defined as any loan secured to single family residences. So it took out that clause where it defined a mortgage loan for primary residences completely out of the definition. And if that was the case, then it would have required anyone making a loan, if it was secured to a single family residence, regardless of the lending entity or regardless of the borrowing entity, and regardless of any declarations of intent or purpose for that loan, it would have made all of that null and void, and you would have had a license to make a loan if the asset, the underlying collateral, was a single family residence. So we were able to keep the current definition of a mortgage loan as it currently is listed in Florida Bill 419.00015, I think is where it's specifically found. This will be an ongoing fight, Hugo. If you are currently investing or making loans in Florida, and this is of course concern to you, then I highly recommend you stay involved with the GRC, these town hall sessions, because inevitably this bill will probably be reintroduced next session in some other format or as an attachment. So it was not a standalone bill. That was the other sneaky thing that was done. It was a last minute attachment on another bill that had bipartisan support. And so that was the difficult thing, is trying to unravel that attachment from the bill that was a good bill. It was addressing a lot of your affordable housing, and it had bipartisan support. So again, that the importance of the GRC and really establishing our presence in each one of the regions across the U.S. is vitally important, especially for private lenders such as ourselves.
And Hugo says thank you for that. It doesn't look like we have any more questions in the queue, so let's go ahead and get this wrapped up for everybody. And of course, if you have additional questions down the road, you can always go to aaplonline.com/government and contact the GRC there. Thank you everyone who attended today and for all the comments and questions that you had. We really appreciate the feedback.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.